Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Katie Yates, Public Relations Specialist at the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. Today, we'll be talking about spring turkey hunting and calling techniques. I'm joined by 3 MDIFW staff members and avid turkey hunters, retired rec safety coordinator Reggie Reed, fisheries resource supervisor Liz Thorndike, and wildlife special projects coordinator Bob Cordes. For those watching at home, be sure to type your questions in the chat box and we'll field audience questions at the end of our discussion. And just a reminder, this conversation is recorded and you'll be able to access it at any time after we are live on our YouTube channel. So just jumping in, Bob, when we talk about turkey hunting, I know there's lots of gear and people can become very gear focused or a little overwhelmed. So let's just start with the most basic and most important, proper clothing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and I'm a self-proclaimed gear junkie, and anybody that's hung around me a while know that I'm the newest and latest thing I need. But I would say that for new beginning hunters, turkeys certainly have great eyesight, and if anybody joined last week, know that they can see pretty well, and camouflage is a pretty effective tool. But our turkey season still can get pretty cold, so you want to make sure you have proper layering and stay away from cotton. But camo, while it's helpful, is not necessary. And so if you have dark clothing, big blotches to break up your human pattern, I think that's the biggest thing. And being still is probably more important. A lot of turkeys were killed prior to the invention of camouflage, for sure. And I think another important thing to really consider in the Maine woods, anytime you're in the Maine woods, whether it's turkey hunting or whatever, is to think about tick safety. And there's some pre-treated clothing out there, but there's some other options that you can use to spray on your clothes. And permethrin's one that's clothing specific. You don't want to use that on your skin, and you certainly don't want to use it wet, but you can spray permethrin and let it dry and last for several washings. So tick safety is a pretty important thing.
Yeah, we did talk a little bit about tick safety in our last discussion as well. So you can always reference last week's panel discussion if you want to hear a little bit more about tick safety. So Liz, I know for women who hunt, women are actually the fastest growing demographic in hunting. But a common complaint is there isn't proper gear for women to wear. What do you recommend?
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, just to add on to what Bob said, I can confirm he is a gear junkie. But and like you said, it's fun to have all the best gear. Not always necessary. But so I think the most important thing to remember, especially for women or anybody getting out in the outdoors, is you want to be comfortable. And Bob kind of touched on it. It can be cold. So a lot of times, you might be getting up at 4 in the morning and it's cold, but by 9, 10 o'clock, you're sweating. So you want to be able to dress in layers. A lot of times it's raining. You want to be prepared for all weather. Sometimes there's snow on the ground in early turkey season. But I think, we're pretty lucky here in Maine. We have a lot of big outdoor sporting stores. And if you can go in, try some clothes on. A lot more companies are making women's clothing, which is really great. For the longest time, I actually was wearing youth clothes because that was the closest thing I could find that would fit and be comfortable. I will say, just from experience, every brand for female hunting clothes varies and fit quite a bit. So, try some on, and whichever brand seems to kind of fit you the best, then you can even go online and look. But, we're pretty fortunate. Cabela's, LO Bean, sometimes Walmart, they'll carry women's clothing. But I think the most important thing is to be comfortable and ready for all weather conditions, whether it's being cold, to hot, to being rained on. You can get it all here in May. So I think that's the most important part.
You actually bring up a good point just with, I know from experience turkey hunting, you might start out really, really cold, and then by the end you're really warm because it can get pretty warm quickly in the spring. So it's definitely a consideration to wear layers. So Reggie, when it comes to a face covering, what do you think? Is that essential?
Yes, thank you, Katie. Yes, it is essential to cover your face in some manner, whether it be a face mask, which we're all used to wearing now, or face paint. They have real good eyesight, as Bob has alluded to, and Liz. So it's an opportunity to disguise your appearance so that the turkeys have not seeing the white face. And I wore today a white shirt just to show how white shows up. So it is important, and to have one that is comfortable. And I say comfortable in that you don't want one that you have to constantly adjust. And as Bob gets into some of the gear, you'll understand why some of the loose face masks are better when you're using some of the calls.
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about this in last week's conversation too. Turkeys are very wary. They have excellent eyesight, and they can see someone blink. They have such great eyesight. So having something that conceals your face, you know, they'll be able to tell if it's a person, right? If they catch your eyes and they kind of see your features. So concealing that is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And also glasses, any way that you can kind of mask. Yeah, they will see you.
That's an excellent point. The glint on your glasses, that will be a dead giveaway. So Bob, I know you weren't on the panel last week, but I know you watched, and we talked a little bit about whether or not using a ground blind or some kind of blind is important. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it depends on your activity. I think last week was discussed that blinds are great for kids, or taking new people out. That the first time that you have a gobbler so close that you can feel him gobbling off your chest and you can feel that reverberation is pretty exciting. Even been turkey hunting for 40 years almost, and still get excited when that happens. And so there's not a name for it like buck fever, but you certainly start getting antsy and moving, or the bird comes up behind you and you fight to turn around and see what's going on. And those kind of quick movements are detrimental to your turkey hunt. And so a blind can eliminate a lot of that, but it does, you know, there's all kinds of blinds out there, from stuff that you can throw in a backpack and whip up pretty quick to a big 2 or 3 person blind that's more of a setup for the season kind of thing. And so, you know, it can help with that concealment, but it can limit where you hunt and being able to move on a bird if that's necessary to your hunt. I like using it periodically, and when I take my kids with me, I certainly do use it. And I don't know if this is the right place to bring it up, but on Saturday at the Wilton Fish and Game Club in Wilton, we're going to have a blind setup and discussion for turkey hunting specifically. And so there's still room to sign up. I think we have 4 or 5 slots left. So anybody on here that wants to, go visit our website and the adult programming section and sign up for that. And I'll look forward to seeing you there.
This is a perfect time to bring that up, actually, Bob, and I will post the link for that and all of the other Next Step programs that we have available that are hunting focused. I'll put that in the chat so everybody can take a look and register. So Liz, what should people keep in mind when they are using a ground blind?
Thanks, Katie. So, you know, I think there's a lot of things to keep in mind. Obviously, if you're going to be setting up a ground blind, make sure you have landowner permission. We kind of touched on that last week. If you're going to leave it, you know, make sure you have it labeled with your name and number. But then there's a lot of things you want to think about, not just hunting, but from the safety aspect, you know. So once you set up, where are your shooting lanes, you know, what's behind you, where might other hunters be? And so, you know, Bobby kind of touched on it, but one of the things I like to do, if I can, sometimes I'll just leave a ground blind out and maybe that'll be a good starting point. And then as the day progresses, if I'm not, having much action or, not hearing anything, then I'll get up and walk, stretch my legs, maybe do some calling from there. But you don't have to have a ground blind, Bob mentioned it, but you can also, there's other things you can buy that might be less expensive. You can buy some camo blankets per se, and maybe just drape over your legs, and you'll be able to use a box call underneath. And sometimes just something little like that might help some people, but certainly with kids, ground blinds can make a big difference.
So you can kind of DIY a ground blind if you need to. Not necessarily, I guess not really a ground blind, but a blanket or even using brush or something, but still get landowner permission for that, right? Yeah,
and for sure, my son likes doing that. He'll always be like, "This is a good spot." But you could certainly take some blowdowns, and I think something to think about is if you're going to be sitting on the ground or sitting in a chair, you don't want to have things up so high that you're having to shoot through them. So keep in mind kind of what level your gun's going to be at, and where you'll be shooting. But certainly you could make your own blind. But if you're not on your own land, get permission. But yeah, that's a great way too, to get out early and build something like that and have some fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I will say, even if you're not hunting with kids, when I went out turkey hunting, I was shaking so much because I was cold that it would have been nice if we had a blind. So Reggie, what are your thoughts on decoys? Are those an essential part of a successful turkey hunt?
No, they're not as essential to hunt turkeys. You can hunt the turkeys without decoys. So they're not necessary, but sometimes they're nice. So different types of decoys, whether they be collapsible, whether they be blow up, whether they be preformed, really depends on your hunting area and your hunting style. I know it was mentioned, run and gun, so to speak. So each time that you pick up to move, you have to pick up your decoys. And same with setting up. If you're striking a bird and the bird responds, you have that setup time of the decoys. So it's a plus and a minus. When do you want to put them out? I know some people will wait until after dark, sneak into their blind, set them up at night prior to the next morning so that they don't have that movement. Really depends on the moon also. You have to take all of that into consideration. Trying to slide out and put a decoy out as it gets light creates a greater risk of the bird seeing you from roost. Also, the decoys, when Liz said, watch your area and the safety aspect of it, you have to remember when that turkey comes in, if it's close to the decoy and you take a shot, it increases the risk of actually striking the decoy. If it isn't your decoy, it might not be such an issue, but if it is, it's a concern. But much more important is the calling, and I say calling techniques. So the real answer there is you don't need decoys. They're nice and they can be useful. So.
And so maybe it's all about technique. Bob, then let's talk about calls. What are some turkey calls, some varieties, and how are they used?
Yep, so I think I'm going to change my video view here. And everything working good there. So I think, you know, we have a wide range of stuff, and what I have shown in the middle here is diaphragm call, mouth call, one of the more popular calls. They can be tricky to use, though. Not everybody can use them. Some people don't have the ability to have them in the roof of their mouth. It tickles or whatever else. They make versions for kids. I think, as you know, we talk about these calls. If someone was first trying it out, this one I think has three latex 3 reeds on there. If you're starting out, don't get crazy. There's like, I am a gear junkie, and only the best is only barely good enough for me. And so I'm constantly thinking the newest, greatest thing. And if it has 5 reeds, I'm going to use it. I'm going to try it. I've got double stack frames, and the more reeds and the more frames you get in there, the harder they are to use. So if you're first starting out, it's the greatest thing is just to get a single reed or a double straight reed, and they may be a little bit harder to find these days, but Quaker Boy makes a nice beginner's double, it's called, and they make a single reed one, and those are the things to start out with. So there's all kinds of varieties, shapes, cut, sizes, and then we have our pot calls. And they are just, this one's a slate call that is, they make them slate over glass, they make them glass, they make them acrylic. The acrylic ones work in the rain. They make all kinds of different strikers, and you know, they're just made by simple friction calls, so they're also called friction calls. I don't have them because I personally don't use them very much, so I had a box call, but a box call is a very effective tool, and maybe one of the easier ones for people to get started with. There's also egg calls and little push button calls. And so I don't have one of those, but they just have a spring loaded thing and you can operate it. Some of them mount right to your firearm. So as we talked about movement and concealment, the mouth call definitely keeps you most concealed because you have that face mask over your mouth. It can be pretty loud. You start having to use this with 2 hands to use a striker or a box call, and you're operating that box call with 2 hands. You need a spare hand to operate that gun. So that's where some of those push calls work in there. And then you can get really creative. And luckily I have someone that thinks enough of me to give me one of his homemade wing bone calls. So take this other stuff out here. And so this call is made from the wing bones of a turkey. And so this mimics, or this was one of the natural calls. And then they've made all kinds of different calls relative to that. They're called trumpet calls, and they're based on this design, and you can make nice turkey squeaks. And then, you know, I've heard some people say that these are a bad thing and unsportsmanlike and they should be outlawed and those kind of things. But I think these certainly have their place. And for someone that is getting new into turkey hunting, my personal feeling is that this is a great tool for someone that may not have developed those skills with the other call techniques at this point. And so using an electronic call is a perfect tool for someone to go out and experience a turkey hunt while they're gaining the experience of listening to the hens, listening to the gobblers call, and trying to mimic that sound. And so I think these are a great tool, and I use them in certain circumstances. They're great for a locator call. You can get very loud volume. You can use them to set them way away from your position. And if you're working a bird in the woods, you can get it out and put it out at that distance. And then that bird's not focused on your position. And it may be a good tool to use with a new hunter that you don't have a blind access. So you could get that attention away from your location, because these birds are well adapted to their environment and they can key in on sounds pretty easily.
And Liz pointed out last week the electronic call was something that I think you talked about it, Liz, for volume. It's something that you can be much louder with the electronic calls than you could be with the standard calls you might use?
Yeah. Like Bob said, I personally don't use an electronic when I'm hunting, but what I do like to use it for sometimes is for a locator call, the crow or the owl call. I'll use that when I'm trying to maybe roost them or just locate them. I think that's a great tool because it can be very loud. And sometimes a lot louder than you could be with a mouth call or a box call or a slate call. So it can be handy and to each their own. But like Bob said, I think to somebody kind of getting new and wants to experience that and maybe just learning while they're out there, it can be pretty useful.
Yeah, and so Reggie, we often defer to you when it comes to calling. So what are some basic techniques for success in your opinion?
Well, asked this question a lot, Katie. For me, it's whatever call works to get the turkey in. So if it's an electronic call to keep cadence, or if it's a trumpet call or a wing bone or a tube call or a push pin, that's what I'm looking at. I, as Bob, am a gear junkie and have quite a few calls. Just real quick, I'll show you what the trumpet call looks like. The push pin, many a turkey been killed with just a push pin call. And you can operate it with one hand, and as Bob said, you can put it on your firearm. The other is just plain yelps. Yelps and cluck and purr is really just some basic calls you need to work with. We had a discussion yesterday on tube calls. And so after we had the discussion, I decided to just make a couple tube calls very quickly. I used a vitamin bottle cut down and a lobster band, and you can see that's a latex glove. Makes an excellent little tube call. And then I got teased because of the 35 millimeter film canister, because they're very hard to find these days, but it makes an excellent tube call. And so I thought I'd be a little creative, and I used a K-cup pod that cleaned out and put the latex glove on and the lobster band, and about as nervous as I can be, shaking. And you can buy tube calls. As Bob and Liz have referenced, you have to have, the more you can have hands free, the better off you are. Or if you're going to concentrate on being the caller, then you might want to have two people hunt. Sometimes that's very beneficial. Also, the caller can back up if the turkey hangs up. Overcalling. So when are we overcalling? I like to engage the turkey if he responds. I like to wait for him to holler again, to gobble again. If he doesn't, I may try one more call. If he still doesn't come, chances are he's busy. And it may be an hour and a half, 2 hours. I'll come back to that area. And the bird very well could be back there looking for the hen, in this case, me calling. Putting reflection in your calling, I think, is huge. Just because the bird isn't coming and is hung up doesn't mean that the bird is an interest. Be patient, and the cluck and purr, the bird will dictate. Just remember, every time you call that bird, he likes to display and he likes to gobble. So he has to stop and do that. And in doing so, he increases the odds of a real hen coming and meeting it. So
Yeah. Oh, all right.
that's what is so exciting about calling, because you just never know.
And you don't, oh, sorry, Reggie, did you have anything else you want to add?
All set, Katie, thanks.
So, you don't have to sound like a professional. I think that Reggie brought up some really, really great points. But Liz, if someone wants to practice, what are some options for them?
Thanks, Katie. I think there's a lot of options, and I think probably most of us started just around the house. So I think my favorite thing to do was with mouth calls is, and probably do this alone, or people riding with you are not going to be happy, but to practice your mouth call just while in the car. If you have a long commute, maybe crack the window because you will feel it on your eardrums. But just if you have a long commute or you're in the car, you have a long car ride, leave your mouth call right in there and just practice with it, because no one can hear you. A turkey can't hear you. It's okay if you make mistakes. And then, with box calls, Bob alluded to it, box calls are a really easy call to start with. And honestly, I have a box call that I love, partially because my dad gave it to me forever ago, but not only that, it's one of my loudest calls. So usually it's when I'm kind of running and gunning, as people call it, that's the one I'll start with. And then when if I get a response, I'll switch over to a mouth call. And, I think the important thing is to have multiple, calls that you could use that you feel comfortable with. And that's another thing, never use a call you don't feel comfortable with. But, if you're good with a box call, but then, as Bob and Reggie mentioned, once the turkey gets closer, if you're not in a blind, then there's the possibility of giving yourself up. So it's good if you can use multiple different calls. So that way, depending on what situation you're in, you're kind of always ready. YouTube is a great thing. I think I still will hop on YouTube and just listen to different calls, because everybody has their own cadence and their own little tweaks to how they want to call. And that's the key, is every turkey's different. So don't think like, oh, I don't sound like the person on YouTube, or I don't sound like the guy on the hunting channel. That's okay. And I think we've all heard stories of someone thinking there was a hunter in the woods because they heard a call that didn't sound right, but it was actually a turkey coming. And then I think, when Bob was talking about mouth calls, and this is something I personally had to do, something to remember, if you're starting a mouth call and you can't get used to it, feels really awkward, you can actually trim those, and it'll say on the box that you can trim those calls to feel comfortable. Some people just have a smaller mouth, so it just feels awkward, and like some people maybe they just don't like it. So try trimming it before you completely don't try it, because it's a really good, useful call. You can make a lot of different calls, but I think just practice. And so my son is actually very good with his mouth, like nothing in his mouth. He can just make a turkey call. So last year when I had him out, he was always like, can I call? And that's an important thing with a kid or any new hunter, is to let them be engaged. So, sometimes for seasoned hunters, it's hard, because it's just like, can't make any wrong sound, but that's okay. Let everybody feel ownership in the hunt and just have fun. And he did last year. I about fell over. He got a response. We were just walking up the road and he was just calling with his mouth. So, let everybody participate and just practice. I think that's the most important thing. If it's a nice afternoon and you're sitting on the deck, bring out your calls and let everybody play with them. So it can be a pretty fun afternoon.
Yeah, definitely a fun way to spend the day. So I'm going to change gears a little bit here and turn to Bob to talk about method of harvest. But before we get into that, a question did just come in. And it's sort of related to our conversation about blinds, so I don't want to skip over it really. So the question came in, should you hang an orange tape or cloth over your position when you're hunting and hunker down on public land or a WMA? Bob, what do you think?
I think it's a good strategy. They even make orange tops, almost like a rain fly for blinds. Some states it's a legal requirement that an orange top goes on your blind, and it just allows, those blinds are fully camouflaged, and if you conceal it with vegetation and stuff, you're really concealed, and that will just allow another hunter to know. And while we talked about turkeys have great eyesight, there's orange flagging all over the woods in Maine, and if you just put an orange flag on a tree behind you or the tree that you're sitting on high up, so it's not drawing attention right to you. I think that's a good safety thing. And later on, when I think we're going to talk about some extraneous equipment that makes my turkey vest weigh about 40 pounds, I'll show a thing that's a commercially available product that you could put out in the woods that says hunter in the area. And it's a pretty neat product that folds right up and goes in your vest pocket.
Great, thanks, Bob. So let's move on to method of harvest. What are some considerations there?
So certainly we have some legal requirements on what's a legal load and what's a legal implement. And so for our spring season, it's limited to shotguns and crossbows and archery equipment. Recently, we added 410s into the mix because of increase or changes in technology of shots. And the tungsten super sport is a non-toxic load that has come great advances in capabilities of the 410 shotgun. And so that combination is a legal implement. But I think it's very important no matter what shot you use. And given the pandemic and this last year with ammo drying up everywhere, it's hard to find even turkey ammunition. And so certainly you don't need turkey specific ammunition. It is designed to reach out a little bit further. And so a very key, no matter what implement you're using or what shot you're using, is to spend time practicing. And I would say, no, if you are used to using number 5 turkey loads in Winchester and you've used them for 10 years and you love them and you can't find them anymore and you have to use number 4 shot, high brass game loads, then you need to go out and practice with that and see how it patterns. And maybe your effective range isn't 40 yards anymore. Maybe it's 30 yards, and you need to consider that when you're placing decoys and marking where you feel comfortable shooting. Luckily, throw in another pitch. I don't know if this is the right time, but at our state range at Summerhaven, right in Augusta, we have some days allotted for turkey patterning. So we have typically we don't allow aerial shotguns and shot shells being used at the range, but we're going to have some specific days where people can sign up, and I think Katie will put the link in there to sign up for those days and come and pattern your shotgun. But I think, as we talked about with other gear, your clothing needs to be comfortable. You need to be comfortable using your calls. And probably the most thing to be effective, in addition to chokes and all kinds of crazy stuff that you can get into, is you need to be comfortable with your firearm, and you need to practice. Can't stress that enough.
Yep, and I will go ahead and post the link to the turkey patterning days at Summerhaven. You do need to register for those, so I will provide the link for that. Some great considerations. Bob, did you talk about bow and crossbow a little bit in method of harvest?
I did. Those are a legal implement, and similar. You want to get out there and shoot them. Your point of aim is going to be a little different for that. For me, when I'm using a shotgun, that's typically what I use. I'm aiming right at the base of the neck and make sure that my pattern fills that area around it. I don't want too many BBs in the breast, because that's what I covet, is that breast meat. But you know, a crossbow, they make different kind of heads, and if you're using a typical broadhead, your aiming point is going to be the chest because you want a heart and lung shot to make a nice humane kill. But they do make specialized broadheads that are made to shoot the turkey in the head, and you can use those. But again, you know, with your implement, you need to practice. And just because crossbows are legal and you use it and they can shoot at the range at 80 yards doesn't mean that that's the most effective shot and that you should be taking it. I don't know if Liz or Reggie have anything to add, because I've never personally hunted with archery equipment. Someday I might, but I have all I can do with a shotgun some days.
Reggie, Liz, anything to add there? Reggie?
Yeah, with a crossbow or with a bow, personally, I like to see the bird hang up right in front of the hunter, so that he or she has a good shot. There's different shot placements for a bow and crossbow, as Bob referenced, and it's practice these shots. So.
Yeah, thanks, Reggie. Practice, practice, practice. And on that note, if you're mentoring someone to go out hunting, what should the mentor keep in mind?
Safety, number one. Safety is a real concern. Making sure they keep their firearm in a safe direction. Make sure the safety's on. If they have an opportunity to have a bird start to get close and they take their safety off and the bird leaves, to put the safety back on. This is something that I think I'm constantly reminding both myself and whoever is hunting with me. And the shotgun in which you're using, make sure that I always like to call it don't overgun. In other words, the shotgun should fit the hunter and the hunter's frame. So if it's a light frame person, I'd like to use a lighter gauge. If it's a person that could handle a 12 gauge or maybe even a 10, then that's what they may elect to use. But as Bob says, make sure you patent them, make sure the person is comfortable with it, make sure the person is familiar with the safety. And don't pressure someone in taking a shot. I've had many people not take a shot because they didn't feel it was in their effective range. Gauge and distance is extremely important. So in mentoring, sometimes I'll put just a stick out where the maximum range is going to be for that person when the bird comes in. It has to be at that stick or closer for them to take a shot. So,
Liz, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think just from personal experience with my son, I've learned a lot taking my son the past couple of years is, you know, we had him practice a lot. And then, but he was always standing. And then we got out in the woods and we were sitting, and the first situation, he didn't feel comfortable. And he's like, I can't put my bead. So that was a lesson learned, you know, with new hunters or kids. If you're going to be in a ground blind in a chair, have them practice from a chair. If you're going to be sitting against a tree, have them practice sitting down. So, I mean, I think that's an important thing to consider, because if you're new to hunting and new to guns, and all of a sudden, if you change one thing, it may feel much different. And you want everybody to feel comfortable. So.
Great, thank you. Yeah, that's a really important point. So Bob, I'm going to turn back to you. We've gone over some of the things that you really need to go spring turkey hunting, but we often, and you said it earlier, call you the gear junkie because you always have so much gear. What are some extra items that you don't necessarily need but may improve the hunting experience?
All right, I'm going to switch my camera view again here. And, you know, I think, you know, as we just talked about, probably this is a rangefinder, and this is a very useful tool, particularly if you're not great at judging distance. You may be at the range and know that you're good out to 40 yards or 50 yards. But what does 40 yards in the woods looks a lot different than 40 yards in a field, and it can be deceiving. So rangefinder is a good thing. Depending on where you're hunting, a GPS and a compass is a really good thing. And I would never go somewhere with a GPS and just trust this because batteries fail, and know how to use a compass. And we do have some adult programs on learning how to use map and compass coming up. We didn't really talk about it with clothing and stuff. We talked about ticks, but oh, the green again. Anyway, this is a thermocell. Stupid thing. Thermocell, keeping mosquitoes away. In my experience, and other people on the panel may have a different experience, they work pretty good for mosquitoes. I don't think they touch black flies, but that's a comfort thing. We talked about the safety aspect, and this is one of those things I was talking about. Hunter in the area, use extreme caution. It's just a little thing that folds up like one of those neat little tents. You can throw it in your pocket. With landowner permission, a little set of clippers is pretty good. So you find a great spot to sit up, but there's a little stick out there that is right in your shooting lane. And so if you're hunting on private property, make sure you can have permission to do a little bit of clipping if need be. We talked about not necessarily needing a blind, but here's some material that you can buy. It's super lightweight. It's super cheap. Just cut a little piece of that, throw it in your pack. That's nice. A lot of turkey vests are pretty handy, or a little backpack to carry all your stuff. But a comfy seat. This is a wide foam pad that's you can lay on the ground and not get wet. But that just on a wet day or a cold morning, gets you up off the ground, keeps your feet from falling asleep. If you're taking kids and you're hunting in a blind, hearing protection is pretty important. And these are electronic muffs that amplify the sound, but then shut off electronically when that gunshot goes off. It's pretty important when you harvest your bird that we have legal requirements for tagging. So we have some Tyvek tags that you can get from the department to take with you. Those are pretty handy. And then when you're hauling it out, some little bit of orange. Most modern turkey vests have a little orange panel in that you can slide out from your camouflage. But being I'm a gear junkie, I found this at a sportsman show, and you can slide this over the legs of a turkey and use it. A 20-pound bird, depending on how far back in the woods you're hunting, can get pretty heavy just grabbing it by the spurs. So they make all kinds of crazy stuff. If you have a shotgun that's not camo, they make, this camera stuff, that screen stuff, but they make little cloth camo tape that you can wrap around the gun, take that shine off the barrel if you want. And then probably for me, this is an important tool. If I don't, maybe not necessarily with me in the field, because I have a little monocular I take, but these are critical in the truck. So if you're driving around scouting for turkeys or whatever, these are critical in the truck. And so decoys, vests, all kinds of stuff. I think turkey hunting, and I'll switch my video back now, but I think turkey hunting, maybe out of hunting in general, has the most gadgets and gear. And I am definitely, to my wife's dismay, tricked and fooled every year. And there's a new call that I just have to have, even though it may sound like the 20 other mouth calls I have. I got to try it because it has a catchy name or something, or there's a new product. And with that, there's a whole lot of stuff out there, but don't get overwhelmed by it. As we've talked about, you have some basic stuff. You need a gun, you need a pair of boots, and you need some warm clothing, and you can be successful turkey hunting.
Thank you for going through all that, Bob. I will apologize. I'm not sure if it's on my end or if it's something else, but it seems like our stream was cutting in and out a little bit. So hopefully everyone at home kind of got the basic run through. Bob, I'm glad you brought up that tape, because there was a question that came in Any preference to camo for your shotgun, vinyl wrap, netting, or a ghillie veil, and is it necessary? I'm not sure if Bob is still on, if you wanted to jump on and elaborate on that at all.
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary. And there's certainly different gun finishes, right? And Parkerized is something that's a dull matte finish, and that's what most modern shotguns have. Lower end modern shotguns, maybe some of your fancy guns have nice blued finishes, and that tape helps knock some of that glare down. Is it important? Not as much as sitting still. Certainly, it certainly could give you an edge, and that cloth wrap sometimes can help protect if you have a fancy gun, help protect the wood finish too. I tend to I've used my guns from everything from pushing brush out of the way to a paddle and a boat. So my guns tend to be working guns, and I don't spend a lot of money on them.
Thanks, Bob. So Liz, what about gear specifically for taking a new person out? What exactly do they need?
To take a new person out, whether it's a friend, family, or a child, the most important thing is patience. So you don't have to buy anything. You just need to be patient, and that's something I've learned. And I think for any seasoned hunter, when you're taking somebody new out, sometimes you just have this hunger to just keep going, and maybe get one more turkey, gobble, and keep going, keep sitting, keep waiting. But to somebody new, that may be the one thing that turns them off, and then you have a hard time getting them into it. And with my son, it was that I kept being kept being like, well, let's go try one more spot, and eventually he was just like, I'm hungry. So I think you have to be patient, and you have to know who you're with and kind of their limitations, and you always want to set up whoever you're with for success. And not success as in you're going to get a turkey, but just success that they're going to have fun. They're going to be comfortable. So whether that's thinking ahead for them, like, well, geez, we're going to be gone a long time. I'm going to pack some extra water. I'm going to pack a snack. My son personally gets hangry, so my turkey vest always has snacks in it. And I think beyond that is just remember you want to have fun. And so if you're upbeat and showing them how much this sport means to you, it really kind of transcends. So that's something I always keep in mind. But there's little things and Bob kind of touched on it. Is if someone's not comfortable, maybe holding up the gun for some reason, and especially with kids, I know my son, he was a great shot, but if once you have that turkey coming in and they're going to notice every single movement, it's key to be still. There's different things you can buy, whether that's a gun rest or a tripod, or for him, we sat on the ground a lot. There was like a little pad, and you strap it to your knee, and it's a foam V, and the gun just sits in it. So little things like that. But I think it's important to just know who you're hunting with and kind of their limitations, and set them up for success.
Thank you, Liz. I am experiencing some internet issues. I'm not sure if everyone at home can still see everything, but I will move forward unless I hear otherwise from somebody. So Reggie, do you have anything to add to what Liz just said?
Yeah, to have a checklist. Have a checklist before you go out. Make sure you have all your items, but especially have a checklist when you're picking up. It may be a turkey steak, turkey decoy steak that gets left. It may be some shot shells. It might be a face mask, or you might lose it on the way out. So make sure you secure all this. And to go back to what Bob said on just for a second on carrying out a bird, remember if they're bleeding, that depending on how that's being carried, it can be quite a mess when you get back to your vehicle. So take that into consideration. I think that's critically important as far as that checklist, and make sure that you have it. Also, look at the other hunter. Does he or she have something that is showing? Something that's showing that the turkey will pick out very quickly. But the checklist is a must. All the gear that Bob has, I'm sure he has a nice backpack to carry all that. The same with the decoys. The more gear you have is the more gear you have to carry into the field and account for when you come out of the field.
Yes, I will. I'll just say, yes, I lost my favorite face mask. So I've been both the beneficiary of someone leaving stuff and the recipient of leaving stuff. So my favorite knife I found stuck in a tree one time when I was a kid, and that's been my favorite knife. It keeps a sharp edge, but I've also lost my favorite face mask. So I think that's a very good tip.
Yeah, thank you. So we are going to talk a little bit about the actual hunt and what happens after the hunt and shot placement in depth next week with the final edition of this panel discussion series. But a question did just come in, and I think it kind of ties into the next question I have for Bob. And it was, do you always see the beard for males for identification, or is it strutting more common as it can be seen easier from farther? Bob, do you want to take that question?
Sure. And, certainly just like humans, there's a lot of variation in wildlife, and turkeys would be no exception to that. And particularly on jakes, it depends on when they were born. If they were a second hatch bird, their beard may not be full and you may not get to see it. However, I would caution that our spring law requires it to be a bearded bird. And so that could be a bearded hen. Some hens, I forget what the percentage is, but some hens do grow beards, and that would be a legal animal to take. But if you can't find that beard, it's important, even if that bird's strutting and gobbling right in front of you, just to be on the safe side, make sure you see that beard. And I guess I'll leave it at that.
Great, thank you. And like I said, next week we will be talking more about the actual hunt and shot placement and after the hunt information. But Bob, we are going to talk a little bit about it today. So what kind of gear will someone need, once they've harvested a turkey this spring?
Yep. So you'll want your knife. If you're a long way from home, I have the advantage of hunting right outside my back door most days, but I like to travel around and hunt different spots and hunt some of our wildlife management areas, other public land. And later in the season, it gets pretty warm, and you want to make sure that you have a way to properly care for that meat. And while you have to present the animal in its entirety at a registration station, it doesn't mean that if you're a long way from one of those registration stations, that you can't remove the breast and leg meat from your bird and stick them in a cooler, or stick your whole bird in a cooler and put a little ice on it to preserve that. So you want your knife. We talked about it earlier. It's pretty handy, whether it's a piece of flagging or part of your turkey vest, but to have some sort of orange. It could be an orange hunting vest, an orange hat. But if you harvest a bird and you're carrying it over your shoulder, it's not out of the realm of possibility for someone to mistake that and get shot. And so it's important to put a little piece of fluorescent on you and have that. And then once you get back home, there's all kind of things, your knives. There's so much from turkeys that can be used from artifacts. And I know we're going to be talking about it later, but some of the popular things are to keep a fan. Maybe I can switch here. Keep your beards. There's all kinds of neat ways. This one, I have a beard glued into the shell casing of the bird I took. My kids love turkey feathers, so we clean up tail feathers and they run around with them. We talked about different calling techniques, but here's a turkey wing that I've cleaned up and dried, and you can use that to mimic birds probably can't hear it, but mimic birds coming off the roost. And sometimes that sound will, if you got a gobbler that's hung up in the roost, sometimes making that mimic that will coax him to come down, fly down, and be part of that activity. So those are some of the things that I take. Sometimes later in the season, I start minimizing how much I'm carrying in the woods, and I leave more stuff in the truck. But typically when I start out, my vest is about 40 pounds, a little more than most people want to carry.
Thank you, Bob. So we only have about 5 minutes left, and I'll just remind everybody that if they do have questions, they can type them into the chat. Again, if they have questions more about the shot and after the shot kind of questions, we can cover those next week more in depth, but I'm happy to dive into them today with the time that we have remaining. So with the last few minutes we have, if we don't have any questions coming through, I'm just going to actually ask each of you, what is the #1 piece of gear that you can't go turkey hunting without? The one thing that people should absolutely make sure they have. And I'm kind of putting my panelists on the spot a little bit because we didn't practice this one. So Liz, I'll start with you. What is the #1 piece of gear that you want to make sure you bring in the field with you when you go turkey hunting?
Well, I feel like this is a gimme, but I guess my gun. You're not going to get far on a turkey hunt without your gun. But I guess if I have my gun, I'd say probably either my favorite mouth call, which is getting really old now, or I have like a 3D like mesh leaf head covering that my dad gave me that I've actually walked miles backwards to track back down. I lost it going under a barbed wire fence. So yeah, I might be wearing like just anything. I might just see a turkey and hop out real quick, but I'm gonna grab that face mask and my gun and go running into the woods. So
Go ahead, Reggie.
Yeah, sorry, I froze up a little bit. I'm not sure if anyone can still hear me, but yeah, Reggie, Bob can handle it if I get lost.
Okay, yeah, I will echo what Liz said. You know, your shotgun, a call, and a face mask are probably the top 3. And gloves with for me the fingertips removed, so that you can work the calls. So that would be the top: gun, face mask, calls, and gloves.
Yep, and I would echo those same things since they got to do more than one. And I'm glad Reggie brought up the gloves because if anybody knows me, I'm a hands talker, so my hands are constantly moving. But we talked about black flies, and as the season goes, you get and you start moving. You can't help yourself. I don't care who you are. Once the black flies get between your hat, bill, and your head, you have to start doing stuff, and those gloves will just help keep that, your big hand from waving in the air. And what I've noticed over the years is now with smartphones, because I'm addicted to it, just like my kids. So constantly checking it and keeps me from being bored too. But either cut out the fingers or have it screen sensitive, because then you're constantly making movement, taking your gloves off to check your phone. And if you can do that without doing that, pretty handy. And then I'm just going to throw in another one because I'm the last and I can. But my favorite piece of camo gear is I have an old bucket hat, boonie cap, that is my favorite turkey hunting hat. And I've had it for probably longer than Katie's been alive, and I'll be sad when that thing is gone.
Well, thank you so much. I apologize if I'm experiencing some technical difficulties over here on my end. We all know in Maine that our internet is not always the most stable. So I hope everyone at home got all that great information. We will be back next week for another edition of this panel discussion series. It will be finishing up with the shot and after the shot placement and all of that great information. and some things about breaking down your turkey and even cooking your turkey. So I hope you'll join us next week. We'll have some different panelists on with us today, and I want to thank the panelists who joined me today and thank everyone at home, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you.